The rain in northeast Portland on a late Tuesday afternoon has a way of blurring the edges of the world. At 3:47 p.m., the gray light was already fading from the windows of my one-bedroom apartment, casting long, soft shadows across the kitchen table. I sat there with my noise-canceling headphones on, a half-empty mug of black coffee beside my laptop, watching lines of code scroll past. I was 32 years old, single, and had lived in this quiet corner of the city for 6 years. My life was a series of predictable, carefully managed routines. Remote work as a senior software developer for a Pearl District fintech firm, a blue Subaru Outback that I maintained with obsessive care, 3 potted plants on the windowsill, and a high-end burr grinder coffee setup that represented my only real indulgence. I had not been in a serious relationship in 3 years, and I was entirely content with the solitude I had constructed. Then my phone vibrated on the wooden table. The screen showed a 541 area code. I hesitated before picking it up. The only person I knew in the Bend area was my college roommate Connor Sterling's grandmother, Mrs. Helen Sterling, who was 84 and made it her personal mission to call me twice a year to ask if I had finally found a good woman to settle down with. I expected her raspy, cheerful voice when I slid the screen to answer. Instead, the voice that came through the receiver was sharp, professional, and tightly wound with tension. "Hello, this is Martha Albright, principal of Cascade Heights Elementary School in Bend. Am I speaking to Lucas Vance?" "Yes," I said, leaning back in my chair. "This is Lucas." "Mr. Vance, your daughter Lily has not been picked up from school today," the woman said, her tone carrying a hard edge of judgment. "She has been waiting in the front office for over 3 hours now. We have tried to reach the other emergency contacts, but no one is answering. We need you to come and collect her immediately, or we will have no choice but to contact Child Protective Services for neglect." I took off my headphones, letting them rest around my neck. The quiet of my apartment suddenly felt heavy, almost suffocating. "I'm sorry," I replied, shaking my head. "You must have the wrong number. I don't have a daughter. I'm 32, single, and I live in Portland. I haven't even visited Bend in years." There was a brief pause on the line, followed by the rustling of paper. "Mr. Vance, your name is listed on this child's emergency contact card as her father. The phone number matches perfectly. Your address is listed as Northeast Portland. Are you Lucas Stewart Vance, born June 3, 1992? My heart gave a strange cold thud. "Yes, that is my name and date of birth." "Then we need you to come to Bend immediately," Principal Albright said, her voice softening slightly but remaining firm. "The drive from Portland is about 3 hours. You need to leave now. If you are not here by the time the building closes, we will be forced to involve the authorities." "Wait," I said, my hand tightening on the phone. "There has to be a mistake. I've never had a daughter. Who put my name on that card?" "The child's mother, Clara Preston," the principal said. "She submitted notarized documentation to our school district in September of last year. We attempted to reach out to you at the time to verify the contact information, but our calls went straight to voicemail and were never returned. Mrs. Preston has been our primary contact for the last 6 years, but we have been unable to reach her since early this afternoon. Her parents, Arthur and Evelyn Preston, are listed as secondary contacts, but their phones are going unanswered as well. Mr. Vance, we have a 6-year-old girl sitting in a chair in our lobby who has been waiting for someone to come for her since school let out. Please tell me you are coming." The word voicemail echoed in my mind. I remembered the previous autumn. I had been overwhelmed with a major systems migration at work, and my phone had been flooded with spam calls. I had set my device to silence unknown numbers, deleting voicemails without listening to them if they didn't have an immediate, recognizable name attached. It was a habit of convenience that now felt like a terrible, compounding mistake. "Clara Preston," I whispered. My mind rushed back to the summer of 2018. I had gone to Bend for Connor's wedding, serving as his best man. At the rehearsal dinner at a local vineyard, I had met Clara. She was 26, working as a graphic designer for a local marketing firm, designing tourism campaigns for the Central Oregon high desert. She had auburn hair, a quick, sudden laugh, and a quiet independence that mirrored my own guarded nature. We spent 6 weeks together that summer. We hiked the dusty trails of Smith Rock, kayaked the cold waters of the Deschutes River, and drank coffee on the sunlit deck of Galveston Avenue. We were careful, or at least we believed we were. When the summer ended, I packed my Subaru and drove back to Portland to start a new position. We texted occasionally in September, but the messages grew shorter, colder. By October, the communication had dried up entirely. I assumed she had moved on, and because I was young, career-focused, and emotionally cautious, I let her go without a fight. I had not heard her voice in more than 6 years. "I'm leaving now," I told the principal, my voice steadier than I felt. "I am getting in my car right now. It will take me exactly 3 hours. Please don't call the police. Tell the little girl that someone is on the way." I hung up, stood at my kitchen table for a long moment, and grabbed my coat and keys. The drive from Portland to Bend is a journey through shifting landscapes. You leave the green, rain-slicked valley of the Willamette, climb up into the dark pine forests of the Cascade Range, and descend into the dry, volcanic high desert of Central Oregon. I drove through the mountain passes in silence, my hands, gripping the steering wheel at 10 and 2. I didn't turn on the radio. I kept my eyes on the highway, trying to calculate the math of the last 6 years, trying to visualize a child I had never seen. At 5:14 p.m., just as I was passing through Madras, the phone rang again. It was Principal Albright. "Mr. Vance, I'm calling to give you an update before you arrive," she said, her voice quiet and heavy. "We finally managed to get in touch with Lily's grandfather, Arthur Preston. He is currently at the county hospital. He suffered a sudden cardiovascular episode during a routine cardiology appointment this afternoon. His wife, Evelyn, is with him. They are holding him for observation. Is he going to be okay?" I asked. "They believe so, but he cannot leave," she replied. She hesitated, and I could hear the slow, drawn-in breath on the other end. "Mr. Vance, there is something else you need to know. Clara Preston passed away 2 days ago." The highway ahead of me seemed to tilt. The volcanic peaks of the Three Sisters stood dark against the orange sunset, but my vision narrowed to the white lines on the asphalt. "What?" "She had been ill for a long time," the principal said softly. The school district's database hadn't been fully updated with the family's situation, and the grandparents had planned to pick Lily up today, but the emergency at the hospital threw everything into chaos. Lily went to school this morning thinking it was a normal Tuesday. She does not know her mother is gone. "Mr. Vance, this little girl has had the most devastating week of her life, and she is sitting in our office waiting for her father to arrive." "I'm driving as fast as I can," I said, my throat dry. "One more thing," Martha Albright added. "Lily has been talking about you for the last year. Her mother told her about you. She knew you would come." I finished the drive through the high desert in a daze, watching the late winter sun slip behind the mountains, leaving a vast, cold darkness in its wake. I pulled into the parking lot of Cascade Heights Elementary at 7:18 p.m. The school was dark, its brick facade casting long shadows under the amber security lights. The parking lot was empty except for a silver sedan and a crossover. The front doors were locked, but a woman in a heavy wool coat was waiting by the glass entrance. She stepped forward as I walked up the concrete path. "Mr. Vance?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm Lucas." "I'm Martha Albright. Thank you for making the drive so quickly." She unlocked the door and gestured for me to follow. The hallways were silent, smelling of floor wax and young children's art projects. We walked past classrooms with darkened windows until we reached the main office. Inside, the room was warm and lit by a single desk lamp. A woman about Martha's age, with kind eyes and a quiet demeanor, sat in a chair near a small fabric sofa. "Lucas, this is Sarah Finch, our school counselor," Martha said. I nodded to Sarah, but my eyes immediately went to the sofa. Sitting there was a little girl in a thick blue sweater and gray leggings. She was small. She couldn't have weighed more than 40 pounds. In her lap, she held a worn gray stuffed elephant with oversized ears. Her hair was dark brown, cut in a bob that framed her face, and her eyes were a deep, familiar shade of brown. She didn't look up immediately. She sat very still, her small fingers tracing the fabric of the stuffed toy. Then she raised her head. She didn't cry. She didn't look frightened. She studied my face with an intense, quiet curiosity. She looked at my hair, then down at my hands, and finally back to my eyes. She slid off the sofa, her small sneakers hitting the carpet with a soft thud, and walked slowly toward me, stopping about 2 feet away. "Are you my dad?" she asked. Her voice was small but steady. The weight of the room, of the last 6 years, of the entire drive across the mountains, collapsed onto my chest. I dropped down onto one knee, bringing myself to her eye level. I tried to speak, but my throat closed up. I swallowed hard and tried again. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I'm your dad." Lily looked at me for another second, searching my face for something only a child could define. Then she let go of the stuffed elephant, letting it drop to the floor, and stepped into my space. She wrapped her thin arms around my neck, burying her face into my shoulder. She held on to me with a fierce, desperate strength, as if she were anchoring herself to the world. I wrapped my arms around her small frame, pulling her close, feeling the steady beat of her heart against mine. "It's okay, Dad," she whispered against my collar. "You're here now." I held her for a long time. The silence of the office, broken only by the quiet, muffled sniffling of Sarah Finch, who had turned her head away to dry her eyes. Martha Albright stood by the doorway, her expression soft and solemn. When Lily finally pulled back, she picked up her elephant and looked at me with a practical, serious expression. "Mom said you would come from Portland. She said you had a blue car. Did you drive the blue car?" "I did," I said, wiping a tear from my own cheek. "It's a blue Subaru. It's parked right outside." She nodded approvingly. "Mom had a green one, but it broke down last winter. Then we got a red Toyota. It has a dent in the front because she hit a deer. It was very loud." "That sounds like a very tough car," I said. "It is," Lily agreed. She turned to the principal. "Can I go with my dad now, Mrs. Albright?" Martha looked at me. "Mr. Vance, we spoke with Evelyn Preston. Arthur is stable, but they want you to bring Lily to their farm. It's about 20 minutes outside of town. I have printed out the directions and the address for you. Here is Lily's backpack." I took the small purple backpack and held out my hand. Lily reached up and took it, her tiny fingers wrapping around my palm. She didn't look back at the school as we walked out into the cold night air. In the parking lot, she looked at my car. "It's bluer than I thought." "Is that okay?" I asked, opening the passenger door. "Yes," she said. I helped her into the back seat, expecting her to sit behind the driver's seat. Instead, she slid over to the seat behind the passenger side. I realized later that she did this because it was where she had always sat in Clara's car, allowing her to see my face in the rearview mirror as I drove. As I started the engine and pulled onto the road, Lily looked at me through the mirror. "Dad?" "Yes, Lily? Mom told me that when I met you, I should tell you something." "What's that, sweetheart?" she said. I should tell you she was sorry. A lump formed in my throat, and I looked out at the dark pine trees lining the highway. "She doesn't have to be sorry, Lily. She did a wonderful job raising you." "That's what she said you would say," Lily murmured, clutching her stuffed elephant. We drove in silence for a few miles. Then she asked, "What do I call you?" "Whatever you feel comfortable with," I said. "But I would love it if you called me Dad." "Okay, Dad," she said, her voice drifting off as she leaned her head against the window. The Preston farm was located off a winding county road east of Bend, where the pine trees give way to wide, open fields of dry sagebrush and juniper. As the headlights swept across the property, I saw a traditional two-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch. A large red barn stood in the distance, flanked by a chicken coop and 3 older pickup trucks. A tall man in his early 70s stood on the porch, illuminated by the yellow porch light. He wore a gray flannel shirt and work jeans, his frame weathered but still broad-shouldered and imposing. His hair was entirely white, and his face was lined with deep, etched grooves of grief and exhaustion. A smaller, gray-haired woman stood beside him, her hands clasped tightly in front of her navy cardigan. I parked the Subaru, walked to the back, and unbuckled Lily. She was half asleep, so I lifted her onto my hip. She was light, her small hand holding onto my collar for balance. As I walked up the wooden steps, the grandfather looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot and swollen from crying. He didn't look at my face. He looked at the hand I had resting on Lily's back. "You have the same hands," he said, his voice gravelly. His wife, Evelyn, stepped forward, her face softening as she looked at her granddaughter. "Arthur, let them inside. The child needs to eat." Inside, the kitchen was warm and smelled of beef stew and fresh bread. Evelyn had clearly been cooking to keep her hands busy, a silent defense against the grief that had invaded their home. Lily immediately ran to her grandmother, wrapping her arms around her waist. "Grandma," Lily said. "Oh, my sweet girl, are you hungry?" Evelyn asked, stroking her hair. "A little bit. Sit down at the table then." While Evelyn poured Lily a glass of milk, Arthur looked at me from the doorway. He gestured toward the screen door. "Outside. Just for a minute." I followed him back out onto the porch. The night air was crisp and smelled of pine and dust. Arthur leaned against the wooden railing, looking out over the dark fields. When he spoke, his voice was tight, trembling with suppressed anger. "7 years, Lucas. You show up now after 7 years." "Mr. Preston," I said, stepping closer. "Arthur, sir, I did not know." Arthur turned to face me, his brow furrowed, his eyes hardening. "What do you mean you did not know? How could you not know?" "I had a 6-week relationship with Clara in the summer of 2018, I said, my voice steady but pleading. "I went back to Portland in late August. We exchanged a few text messages, and then they stopped. I had no idea she was pregnant. I had no idea she had a child. I didn't know I had a daughter until the principal called my phone at 3:47 this afternoon. I came as fast as I could." Arthur stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He searched my face, looking for a lie, but found only the raw truth. "My daughter? Clara never told you?" "No, sir, she didn't." Arthur let out a long, ragged breath and turned back to the dark yard. He gripped the wooden railing so hard his knuckles turned white. "She let us believe. She let us think you knew. She told us you knew about the baby and chose to stay in Portland. She made us believe you had abandoned her. I have spent 6 years hating you, Lucas. I have spent 6 years cursing your name every time I looked at my granddaughter." "I am so sorry, Arthur," I said. "If I had known, I would have been here from day one. I swear to you." Arthur stood in silence for several minutes, the only sound the wind moving through the dry grass. When he finally looked back at me, the anger was gone, replaced by a deep, hollow exhaustion. "I've been carrying 7 years of anger at the wrong man. I am angry at my daughter, and now I can't even tell her because she's gone." "I understand," I said quietly. "She left a letter for you," Arthur said, reaching into his pocket. "We found it on her kitchen table in her apartment. It had your name on it. She wrote it about 2 months ago, when the doctors told her the treatments weren't working anymore. She told me about it last week. She said it was only to be given to you after she passed, and only when you came for Lily." He held out a thick, sealed envelope. "Have you read it?" I asked. "No," Arthur said. "It was written for you, not for me. Lily will sleep here tonight. She's been staying with us since Clara got too sick to care for her. Tomorrow morning you come back here at 9. You and I will go to Clara's apartment, and you will read that letter. Then we will sit down and figure out what we do next." "Yes, sir," I replied. "And Lucas?" Arthur said, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Tonight we are going to be civil for that little girl. She has lost her mother. She doesn't need to see her father and grandfather fighting. We eat dinner, we put her to bed, and we let her sleep knowing her dad is here." We went back inside. Dinner was quiet but warm. Lily ate her stew, chattering about her teacher, Mrs. Page Campbell, and her best friend Liam, who had lost his front tooth. I listened to every word, committing the details of my daughter's life to memory. Later, I sat on the edge of the twin bed in Lily's room. The walls were decorated with drawings of horses and marine animals. I read her a chapter of Charlotte's Web, and she fell asleep, holding my forearm with one hand and her stuffed elephant Peanut in the other. I stayed there for a long time watching her breathe, before leaving for a hotel in town at 9 a.m. The next morning, I met Arthur at the farm, and we drove to Clara's apartment on the west side of Bend. The space was small, smelling of lavender and stale coffee. Lily's drawings were taped to the refrigerator, and photos of Clara and Lily filled the room. On the kitchen table sat the sealed envelope. Arthur went outside to wait on the steps, leaving me alone. I sat at the wooden table and opened the envelope. Inside were 6 pages of Clara's neat, elegant handwriting. "Lucas," the letter began, "if you are reading this, I am gone, and you have 1,000 questions. I am sorry I cannot answer them in person. I was planning to call you next week. I had been planning to call you for 3 months, but I was a coward." The letter explained that the summer of 2018 had been real and meaningful to her, but she had been terrified of rejection. When she found out she was pregnant in October, she made a decision within 12 hours. She was 26, financially stable, and had supportive parents. She convinced herself that telling me would force a life-changing decision on me that I wasn't ready for. She called it generosity, but in the letter she admitted it was pride and fear. She didn't want to risk me telling her that I didn't want the child. Lily was born on February 19, 2019. Clara wrote about how perfect Lily was and how much she regretted keeping us apart. In April of 2023, Clara was diagnosed with stage IV pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave her 18 to 24 months. Even then, she hesitated to call, always telling herself she would do it soon. 18 months before her death, she began preparing. She hired a family attorney in Bend, Marcus Thorne, to draft paternity acknowledgments and custody petitions. She had an investigator locate my address and phone number in Portland to ensure everything was accurate. 6 months ago, she added me to Lily's school emergency card. She wrote that she had instructed Thorne to leave detailed voicemails, but since I never answered, she assumed I screened my calls. "I am asking you for one thing, Lucas," she wrote. "Be her father, not because you owe me, but because she is yours. She is a remarkable girl, and she has known about you for a year. I told her you were a good man who lived in Portland and would come for her when the time was right. I am sorry for the lost years. I am sorry I didn't call. I am leaving her in your hands, and I am not afraid." At the end of the letter, she added a postscript. "Lily loves horses. She is scared of spiders. She reads at a third-grade level. Her cat is named Buster, and he is a coward. You must protect him from the neighbor's dogs." I sat at the table for 45 minutes, reading the letter over and over, tears streaming down my face. I finally walked outside and sat next to Arthur on the concrete steps. I handed him the letter. "Read it," I said quietly. "You need to know the truth." Arthur put on his reading glasses and read in silence. When he finished, his eyes were wet. He folded the stationery and handed it back to me. "My daughter was a proud woman, Lucas," he said, his voice cracking, "and she was wrong. I am sorry for the way I treated you." "We both lost time," I said, "but we have Lily now. I'm going to move to Bend. My company allows remote work. I will sell my Portland apartment and rent a house here. Lily will grow up near you and Evelyn. She will have her grandparents, and she will have her father." Arthur looked at me, a flicker of relief in his tired eyes. He reached out and shook my hand. "Welcome to Bend, Lucas." Over the next few weeks, the process began. We took a DNA test at a local clinic, which confirmed a 99.99% probability of paternity. I called my mother, Helen Vance, in Rochester, New York. She was stunned but immediately booked a flight to Oregon. When she met Lily on the Preston farm, she wept, holding her granddaughter close. I called my best friend and boss, Connor Sterling, to ask for leave. Connor was incredibly supportive. "Take 6 weeks, Lucas. Take whatever you need. I'll cover your projects. Go learn how to be a dad." I hired a family attorney in Portland, Julian Cross, to handle the legal transition. Julian worked closely with Marcus Thorne to file the pre-prepared custody petition. Because Clara had laid the groundwork so meticulously, the legal path was clear. The custody hearing took place on May 14, 2025, in the Deschutes County Circuit Court. Arthur testified in support of the petition, telling Judge Miriam Hayes that I was the father Lily had been waiting for. Judge Hayes, looking over the documents, smiled gently. "Mr. Vance, your daughter is fortunate. Her mother saw clearly what was needed and made the necessary arrangements. Your job now is to be the father she deserves. Are you prepared?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. The judge struck her gavel. "Petition granted. Lily Preston Vance is in your custody." As we stood to leave, Lily held my hand. Judge Hayes looked down from the bench. "Lily, are you happy today?" "Yes, Your Honor," Lily said. "Because Mom said my dad would come, and he did. By early June of 2025, I had sold my Portland apartment and rented a charming yellow craftsman bungalow on a quiet tree-lined street in Bend, just 6 minutes away from Arthur and Evelyn's farm. I spent 2 weeks painting Lily's bedroom her favorite shade of light purple, setting up a reading nook with a small armchair, and organizing her collection of books and stuffed animals. On the 1st of July, Lily officially moved in. She brought her stuffed elephant Peanut, a small wooden box containing photos of her mother and her gray cat, Buster, who spent his first 3 days hiding behind the dryer. The transition wasn't easy. During the first month, Lily woke up frequently in the middle of the night, crying out for Clara. I would sit on the edge of her bed, rubbing her back, and tell her stories about her mother. Stories I had gathered from Arthur, Evelyn, and the family photo albums. I never tried to replace Clara. I told Lily that her mother was irreplaceable and that it was okay to be sad and angry. I followed Clara's advice from the letter. I was honest, I was present, and I didn't pretend to have all the answers. Slowly, the tears turned into laughter. By August, Lily was sleeping through the night. By October, she was giggling at my terrible dad jokes. By Christmas, she was actively critiquing my hair braiding skills before school. It is now the spring of 2026. I am 33 years old, and Lily is 7. We have built a beautiful life in our yellow bungalow. Every Sunday, Arthur and Evelyn come over for dinner. Evelyn is teaching Lily how to bake berry pies, and Arthur is teaching her how to tend to the chickens at the farm. Lily even named the lead chicken Clara, and the rest of the flock follows her around the yard. My mother, Helen, visits 4 times a year, bringing suitcases full of books and sharing stories of my own childhood. My sister Chloe and her husband David visited for Thanksgiving with their 2 boys, Leo and Mason. Lily loved meeting her cousins, and they spent the weekend building a massive fort in our backyard. Connor Sterling comes down from Portland twice a year. He is teaching Lily how to throw a softball, and she affectionately calls him Uncle Connor. I still work as a senior software developer, entirely remote. I write code during the hours Lily is at school, cook dinner most nights, and drive her to school every morning at 7:45. I haven't dated since that life-altering phone call, though I have spoken a few times with Lily's school teacher, Miss Paige Campbell, who is wonderfully kind and patient. I'm not ready yet, but I think I might be. Eventually, sometimes I sit on the porch in the evening and think about Clara. I don't feel anger toward her anymore. The anger would only diminish the gift she ultimately gave me. She made a choice out of fear, but she spent the last years of her life ensuring that her mistake wouldn't hurt Lily's future. I think about the summer of 2018. I think about the trails at Smith Rock, the coffee at Galveston Avenue, and the daughter we made without my knowledge. I think about how close I came to never knowing her, if the school hadn't had my correct number, if Principal Albright hadn't verified my birth date, if Arthur hadn't had his cardiology emergency that Tuesday afternoon, I would still be sitting in my Portland apartment, with my noise-canceling headphones on, eating microwave dinners, completely unaware that the most important person in my world was 60 miles away, calling out for me. It wasn't a wrong number. It was the call that saved my life. If a phone call came for you tomorrow, telling you that you had a child you never knew existed, what would you do? Would you doubt? Would you demand proof? Or would you get in your car and drive? I almost asked for proof. I am so very glad I didn't. Sometimes the things we don't know are the things that have already shaped who we are. If you have a child in your life who has been waiting for you to show up, your own or someone else's, drop their first name in the comments below. Just one name. I read every single one. If this story moved you, please hit the like button, share it, and subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one.